Good evening, and welcome to Restored Lore, your home for old, odd, and obscure stories. Tonight we have another story about Gabriel Foot, highwayman, since we enjoyed the two householders so much. This one is called The Captain from Bath by Arthur Thomas Quiller-Couch. This story was first published in Couch's short story collection Wandering Heath in 1895. It's a fun, cheeky little adventure. Now, let's open our imaginations and begin. Extract from the memoirs of Gabriel Foot, highwayman. Our plan of attack upon Nanscombe House was a simple one. The old baronet, Sir Harry Dennis, took a just pride in his silverware. Some of it dated from Elizabeth, for Sir Harry's great-great-grandfather, as the unhappy alternative of melting it down for King Charles, had taken arms against his Majesty and come out of the troubles of those times with wealth and credit. The house, too, was Elizabethan, shaped like the letter L, and, like that letter, facing eastward. The longer arm, which looked down the steep slope of the park, contained the entrance hall, chapel, dining hall, principal living rooms, and kitchens. The ground floor of the other, and to us more important arm, was taken up by the housekeeper's rooms, audit room, and various offices, the butler's bedroom, and the strong room, where the plate lay. On the upper floor, a long gallery full of pictures ran from end to end, with a line of doors on the southern side, all opening into bedrooms, except one, which led to the back stairs. Now, properly speaking, the strong room was no strong room at all. It had an ordinary deal door and an ordinary country-made lock. But in some ways it was very strong indeed. The only approach to it on the ground floor lay through the butler's bedroom, of which you might call it but a cupboard. It had no window, and could not therefore be attacked from outside. The very small amount of light that entered it filtered through a pane of glass in the wall of the back staircase, which ran up close behind. I have said enough, I hope, for any reflective man to draw the conclusion that, since we desired no unpleasantness with the butler, a man between 50 and 60 and notoriously incorruptible, our only plan was to make an entrance upstairs by the long window at the end of the picture gallery, or corridor, whichever you choose to call it, descend the back stairs, remove the pane of glass from the wall, and gain the strong room through the opening. The house was dark from end to end, and the stable clock had just chimed the quarter after midnight when I went up the ladder. I never looked for much carefulness in this honest country household, but I did expect to spend 20 minutes in the heavy lead work of the lower panes, and it seemed as good as a miracle to find the lattice unlatched and opening to the first gentle pull. I pressed it back, hitched it under a stem of ivy that the wind might not slam it after me, and, signaling down to Jimmy at the foot of the ladder to wait for my report, pulled myself over the sill and dropped softly into the gallery. And then somebody stepped quickly from behind the heavy window curtain, reached out and shut the lattice smartly behind me, and said, "Show a light, Jenkins, and let us have a look at the gentleman." Though it concerned my neck, I was taken too quickly aback to stir, but stood like a stuck pig while the butler fumbled with his tinderbox. "Light all the candles." "If it please you, Sir Harry," Jenkins answered, puffing at the tinder. The first thing I saw by the blue light of the brimstone match was the barrel of old Sir Harry's pistol glimmering about 6 inches from my nose. On my left stood a long-legged footman, also with a pistol. But all this, though discomposing, was no more than I had begun to expect. What really startled me, as old Jenkins lit the candles, was the sight of 2 women standing a few paces off beneath a tall picture of a gentleman with a big lace collar. One of them, a short woman with a bunchy shape, I recognized for the housekeeper. The other I guessed as quickly to be Sir Harry's daughter, Mistress Kate, a tall and slender young lady, dark-haired and handsome as any man could wish. She was wrapped in a long travelling cloak, the hood of which fell a little off her shoulders, allowing a glimpse of white satin. A train of white satin reached below the cloak and coiled about her pretty feet. Now, the change from darkness to very bright light, for Jenkins went down the gallery lighting candle after candle, as if for a big reception, made us all wink a bit. And excitement would account for the white of the young lady's cheeks. I dare say I had turned pretty pale. But it did not seem to me to account for the look of sheer, blank astonishment. No, it was more than this. A wild kind of wonder would be nearer the mark that came into her eyes and stayed there. And I didn't quite see why she should put a hand suddenly against the wainscot, and from sickly white go red as fire, and then back to white again. If they were sitting up for housebreakers, I was decidedly a better-looking one than they had any right to expect. The eyes of the others were fastened on me. I was the only one to take note of the girl's behavior, and I declare I spared a second from the consideration of my own case to wonder what the deuce was the matter with her. "Well, upon my soul," cried Sir Harry, with something between a laugh and a sniff of disgust, and the footman on the other side of me echoed it with a silly cackle. "He certainly doesn't look as if he came from Bath." "Sir," I expostulated, for when events seem likely to prove overwhelming, I usually find myself clutching at my original respectability. "Sir, although the force of circumstances has brought me thus low, I am, by birth and education, a gentleman. Having told you this, I trust that you will remember it, even in the heat of your natural resentment." "You speak almost as prettily as you write," he answered scornfully, pulling a letter from his pocket. This is beyond me, thought I, for of course I knew it could be no letter of mine. Besides, a glance told me that I had never set eyes on the paper or handwriting before. I think my next remark showed self-possession. "Would you be kind enough to explain?" I asked. "I rather think that should be your business," said he. And, faith, I allowed the justice of that contention, awkward as it was. But he went on, "It astonishes you, I dare say, to see this letter in my hand." It did. I acknowledged as much with a bow. He began to read in an affected, mimicking voice. "My ever-loved Kate, since your worthy but wrong-headed father—" "Father!" It sounded like an echo. It came from the young lady, who had sprung forward indignantly and was holding out a hand for the letter. "The servants! Have you not degraded me enough?" She stamped her foot. The old gentleman folded up the letter again and gave it into her hand with a cold bow. She was handing it to me, the unfathomable depth of woman, when he interfered. "For your own delectation, if you will, miss, but as your protector I must ask you not to give it back." He turned towards me again. As he did so, I caught, over his shoulder, or fancied I caught, a glance from Miss Kate that was at once a warning and an appeal. The next moment her eyes were bent shamefast upon the floor. I began to divine. Said I, "If that's a sample of your manner towards your daughter, even you, in your cooler moments, can hardly wonder that she chooses another protector." "Protector?" he repeated, lifting his eyebrows, and that infernal footman cackled again. "If you can't behave with common politeness to a lady," I put in smartly, "you might at least exhibit enough of rude intelligence to lay hold of an argument that's as plain as the nose on your face." "Gently, my good sir," said he. Do you know that if I chose, I can march you off to jail for a common housebreaker? I should think I did know it a plaguey sight better than he. To begin with, he went on, you look like one, for all the world. This was sailing too close for my liking. Old gentleman, said I, you are wearisomely dull. Possibly I had better explain at length. To be frank, then, I had counted, in case of failure, to avoid all scandal to your daughter's name. I had hoped, you will excuse me, to have carried her off and evaded you until I could present myself as her husband. If baffled in this, I proposed to make my escape as a common burglar surprised upon your premises. It seems to me, I wound up, including the 3 servants with an indignant sweep of the arm, that you might well have emulated my delicacy. As it is, I must trouble you to recognize it. Heaven send, I added to myself, that the real inamorato keeps his bungling foot out of this till I get clear. And I reflected with much comfort that he was hardly likely to make an attempt upon premises so brilliantly lit up. In justice to my daughter's taste, replied Sir Harry, I am willing to believe that you looked something less like a jailbird when she met you in the pump room at Bath. You have fine clothes in your portmanteau, no doubt, and I sincerely trust they make all the difference to your appearance. But a fine suit is no expensive outfit for the capture of an heiress. You may be the commonest of adventurers. How do I know, even, what right you have to the name you carry? If he didn't, it was still more certain that I didn't. Indeed, he had a conspicuous advantage over me in knowing what that name was. This very painful difficulty had hardly presented itself, however, before the girl's wit smoothed it away. She spoke up, looking as innocent as an angel, too. Captain Fitzroy Pilkington could add no luster to his name, father, by giving it to me. His family is as good as our own, and his name is one to be proud of. So it is, my dear, thought I, if I can only remember it. So, it's Captain Fitzroy Pilkington I am, and from Bath. Decidedly I should have taken some time in guessing it. I suppose, sir, I may take it for granted you have not brought your credentials here tonight, said the old boy with a grim smile. It was lucky he had not thought of searching my pockets for them. Scarcely, sir, I answered, smiling too and catching his mood, and then thought I would play a bold card for freedom. Come, come, sir, I said. I have tried to deceive you, and you have enjoyed a very adequate revenge. Do not prolong this interview to the point of inflicting torture on 2 hearts whose only crime is that of loving too ardently. You have your daughter. Suffer me to return to the inn in the village, and in the morning I will call on you with my credentials and humbly ask for her hand. If, on due examination of my history and circumstances, you see fit to refuse me, why then you make 2 lovers miserable. But I give you my word, the word of a Fitzroy Pilkington, that I will respect that decision. Partus juntus quartian finestris, or rather, I will discontinue the practice altogether. William, said Harry shortly to the footman, show Mr. Pilkington to the door. Will you take your ladder away with you, sir, or will you call for it tomorrow? Tomorrow will do, I said airily, and, stepping across to Mistress Kate, I took her hand and raised it as if for a kiss. Her fingers gave mine an appreciative squeeze. But who in the world are you? She whispered. I think, said I, bending over her hand, I have fairly earned the right to withhold that. Sir Harry bowed a stiff good night to me, and William, the footman, took a candle and led the way along the gallery and down the great staircase to the front door. While he undid the chain and bolts, I was thinking that he would be all the better for a kick, and as he drew aside to let me pass, I took him quickly by the collar, spun him round, and gave him one. A flight of a dozen steps led down from the front door, and he pitched clean to the bottom. Running down after, I skipped over his prostrate body and walked briskly away in the darkness, whistling and feeling better. I went round the end of the gallery wing, just to satisfy myself that Jimmy had got away with the ladder, and then I struck across the plantation in the direction of the village. The June day was breaking before I turned out of the woods onto the high road, and already the mowers were out and tramping to their work. But in the porchway of the village inn, called the Well Diggers' Arms, whatever they may be, I surprised a cockneyfied groom in the act of kissing a maiden who, having a milk pail in either hand, could not be expected to resist. Said I to the man. "I'm sorry to appear inopportunely, but I have a message for your master." The maiden fled. "And who the deuce may you be?" asked the groom, eyeing me up and down. "I think," I answered, "it will be enough for you that I come from Nancecarn. You were late there." "Oh, yes," I went on sharply, for fellows of this class have a knack of irritating me. "And I have a message for your master, which I'll trouble you to deliver when he comes down to breakfast. You will tell him, if you please, that Sir Harry was expecting him last night, and the lights he saw lit in the long gallery were there for his reception. You won't forget?" "Who sent you here?" the fellow asked. "On second thought," I continued, "you'd better go in and wake Captain Fitzroy Pilkington up at once. He will pardon you when he has my message, for Sir Harry's temper is notoriously impatient." And with that I turned and left him, for it was high time to find out how Jimmy had been faring. The past night's experience must have given him a shock, and I reckoned to give him another. I wasn't disappointed either. I walked leisurely down the village street, then crossed the hedge and doubled back on the high moors. At length, drawing near the old gravel pit where we had fixed to meet in case of separation, I dropped on all fours, and so came up to the edge and gave a whistle. Jimmy was sitting with his back to me and about to cut a hunch of bread to eat with his cold bacon for breakfast. Instead, he cut his thumb and jumped up, singing out, "S'help me, but I never looked to see you again outside of the dock." "No more you did," said I, and climbing down and sitting on a gravel heap beside him, I told him all the story. "And now, Jimmy," I wound up, "you must guess what I'm going to do." "I don't need to," said he. "I know." "I wager you don't." "I wager I do." "Well then, I'm going back. Was that what you guessed?" "I think you will not." "Ah, but I will," said I. "I swore by the blood of a Fitzroy Pilkington I'd be back in the morning, and I can't retreat from so tremendous an oath as that. Back I mean to go. As for the real captain, if captain he is, I fancy I've scared him out of the neighborhood for some time to come. And as for the credentials, I fancy, at my time of life, I should be able to write my own commendation. I believe the old boy has a sneaking goodwill towards me. I can't answer for the girl, but I can answer that she'll hold her tongue, for a while at all events. This life doesn't become a man of my education and natural ability, and the risk is worth running." "I wouldn't if I were you," says he, very dryly. "And why not?" "Well, you see, when I heard the noise last night and all the place grew light as it did, I was just starting to run for dear life, till it struck me that if the folks meant to go searching for me, they wouldn't begin by lighting the picture gallery from end to end. So I drew close in the shadow of the wall and waited, ready to run at any moment. But after a while, finding that nothing happened, I grew curious and crept up after you and looked in through the window, very cautious. Nice fix you seem to be in, but old Jenkins was there. And while Jenkins was there... Well? Well, I should have thought you might have guessed. The bolt of his bedroom window wasn't hard to force, nor the lock of the small room. Being single-handed, I had to pick and choose what to carry off, but if you look under the bracken yonder, you'll own I know my way among silverware. I looked at him for a moment, and then lay gently back on the turf, and laughed till I was tired of laughing. This story isn't as suspenseful as The Two Householders, and it's much lighter and more playful, but Gabriel has that same quick wit and cheeky confidence that makes him such a likable thief. And, funnily enough, in this story also he finds an ingenious way to escape his life of crime, only to be thrown back upon it at the end. This story bears a second listen, or you can use the link in the description to read it online yourself, but here's a quick recap. The girl, Miss Kate, apparently met a captain at Bath and decided she wanted to run away with him. They arranged for him to climb up to the window and carry her away at night, which is why the window was already unlatched when Gabriel got there, and she was already wearing a traveling cloak. However, someone in the family gave the letter to Sir Harry, so the father and the household were waiting for the captain to arrive when Gabriel, just by coincidence, arrived instead. Now, the girl had no idea who he was, but she doesn't want to let anyone know, presumably because she doesn't want her father to capture and threaten her real boyfriend. So she helps Gabriel keep up the pretense, first by trying to give him the letter so he can read it, and then by supplying his name. Gabriel gets himself out of it by offering to come back in the morning and propose properly. Then he decides he is going to go back and propose properly. Since she's already pretended that he's her boyfriend, she can't really easily back down from the pretense, and he can marry an heiress. So he goes and he tells the captain's servant that the father is out to get him in order to scare them out of town. And he's planning on forging some documents and just assuming the identity of Fitzroy Pilkington. Except that Jimmy already robbed the place while all of this was happening, so presumably the two of them just make off with their spoils. I love Gabriel's personality in this story. The little asides where he talks to himself, they're sharp and they're funny and they help us keep track of the plot, and his keen observations help him navigate the situation. He colludes seamlessly with Miss Kate in order to deceive her father. He makes repeated little references to how good-looking he is. He's so likable and he knows it. You may have noticed that Gabriel used some Latin while he was talking to Sir Harry. Partus juntus quatiorn fenestris. It's funny because a long time ago I took a little Latin myself, and I thought this was something about 4 windows, and I couldn't figure out what it meant or how it worked in context. He says that if Sir Harry refuses him as a suitor, he will accept that decision and, quote, Parcus juntus quatiorn fenestris, or rather, I will discontinue the practice altogether, end quote. So I looked up this phrase online thinking that it was a common Latin quote or a phrase, which it is not. It means the 4 windows are loosely joined together. One AI-based translator says it means rarely do they shake the windows. But because none of this returns any results that mean anything, I don't think it's an actual quote that Gabriel is using because it's relevant to the situation. I think he's just tossing a few words of Latin into his conversation to make himself sound more posh and educated in order to impress Sir Harry. Let me know if you think differently. If you listen all the way to the end of the video, you get to hear me make a little confession. This week's confession is that we are in the time of the year where there are just so many holidays in the Netherlands. I originally moved here in early April, and it seemed like every other day was a holiday for something or another. 2 days for Easter, 2 days for Pentecost, King's Day, Independence Day. Like, April and May are just stacked up with holidays. And my confession is that I took Monday this week as a holiday, even though I never take national holidays off because honestly, I work so few hours and have such a weird schedule anyway. Taking another day off is a little bit meaningless. But it was also somehow lovely and special to wake up on Monday and just act like it was still Easter and I didn't have to do anything. The big difference in the Netherlands is how Carnival is celebrated in the south and King's Day is celebrated in the north. It's just night and day. And the Dutch are so wonderful for being so calm and normal and rational all the time, and then just going bonkers on King's Day or New Year or whatever, and dressing up and acting a fool and having a great time, and then just going back to normal the next day. I love it. All things in moderation, including excess. If you'll bear with me for just a brief news update, the Airbnb guests were lovely. Two very young, very polite, very quiet brothers staying overnight on a bike tour. It was great, and I really appreciate your support with my nerves. Speaking of support, Sage Rat is not only my first ongoing monthly supporter, which is just so sweet and thoughtful, but they're also an absolute champion in the comments. I just love this little community that's happening here. And also, YouTube is expanding that portion of the platform to help foster ongoing conversations and connections in the community tab to make it easier to actually communicate rather than just react. I was really pleased that you all liked the last Gabriel Foot story so much, and I wanted to do the next one while it's still fresh. If you like stories that are old and weird, but also fresh and a bit cheeky, you should subscribe to the channel and choose notifications so you never miss a story. Please also drop me a like or a comment below. I'm always curious what people think. Finally, to support the channel even further, consider buying me a book using the link in the description. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll see you in a few days.